Have you ever felt so tired of learning English that you just wanted to give up? I have. One freezing morning in Denmark, I sat alone staring at my coffee, wondering if I'd ever be good enough to speak fluently. But that quiet morning, and one simple conversation with a kind stranger, changed everything. In this video, I'll take you back to the little coffee shop where I found myself again, and how learning English slowly, softly, and sincerely helped me heal. The morning I almost gave up. It was one of those mornings when Denmark felt heavier than usual. The sky was gray, the streets were quiet, and even the air seemed to whisper, "Why bother?" I had been living there for months, surrounded by people who spoke perfect English with effortless confidence, while I stumbled over simple sentences like, "How's your day?" Every mistake echoed in my head like thunder. Every pause felt like failure. I remember sitting by the window of my small apartment in Copenhagen, sipping instant coffee that tasted like cardboard and thinking, maybe I'm just not meant to learn this. That's the kind of thought that sneaks in when you're tired, not just tired of grammar or vocabulary, but tired of feeling stupid. It's the kind of exhaustion that comes from comparing your beginning to someone else's middle. You see, when you move to another country, language isn't just a skill, it's survival. You need it to make friends, to buy bread, to feel like you exist. But the more I tried, the more my words betrayed me. My mouth refused to cooperate. My accent got in the way. My confidence melted faster than Danish butter on a hot pan. That morning, I put on my coat just to escape my thoughts. I didn't have a plan, only a need to breathe. My feet led me down a narrow cobblestone street I hadn't noticed before. And that's when I saw it. A small coffee shop glowing softly in the cold morning air. The sign above the door read, "The Little Haven." Something about it called me in, maybe the warmth, maybe the smell of roasted beans, maybe the hope that I could hide there for a while. I didn't know then that this small detour would change everything. That behind that wooden door I would learn the most powerful English lesson of my life, one that had nothing to do with textbooks. Because sometimes when you think your journey is ending, it's only turning a corner. A quiet corner in Copenhagen. When I stepped inside the little haven, it felt like walking into another world. The warmth wrapped around me like a soft blanket, carrying the smell of freshly ground coffee and cinnamon. There was quiet music playing, something slow and dreamy, and the faint sound of people talking in low voices. Most of them spoke English, but not like the English I'd learned from textbooks. Their words were smooth, alive, and full of rhythm. I could understand some, and lose some. I found a corner seat by the window, my safe zone. From there, I could just watch without being noticed. A couple near me was laughing, their accents mixing Danish and English in a beautiful mess. At the counter, a tourist tried to order in broken Danish, and everyone smiled kindly instead of correcting her. That small moment hit me. No one cared about perfection here. The only one judging me was me. For months I had treated English like a battlefield. Every mistake a wound, every pause a defeat. But sitting in that quiet corner, I realized language could also be a bridge. A gentle one. A way to connect instead of compete. Maybe learning didn't have to hurt. Maybe it could be soft. A barista noticed me sitting there, shivering a little, and smiled. "Cold morning, huh?" he said slowly with an accent I couldn't quite place. I froze, half afraid to answer, half desperate to try. "Why, yes," I replied, my voice shaky but real. He nodded and said, One warm cappuccino coming up. Just that. Simple. Human. And somehow that tiny exchange, that non-judgmental warm sentence started to melt something inside me. I didn't feel like a student anymore. I felt like a person that I watched him move behind the counter, calm and focused, and I thought, maybe this is what I've been missing. A space where I can listen, not pressure myself. Where I can speak, not perform. Maybe language is less about grammar and more about connection. Little did I know that barista would soon become the reason I fell in love with English again. The barista who spoke slowly. He placed the cup on the counter and called out, "Cappuccino for you." His tone was calm, clear, almost musical. I walked up, smiled nervously, and said, "Thank you." He grinned and replied, "No rush, take your time. It's a slow morning anyway." That one sentence, "It's a slow morning anyway," felt like a tiny door opening in my brain. His English wasn't fast or complicated. It was slow, gentle, kind. For the first time, I realized that slow English wasn't something to be embarrassed about. It was something to admire. He started chatting as he wiped the counter. "You're not from here, are you?" I shook my head. "No. I'm learning English. Still not very good." He laughed softly. "Then this is the perfect place. We speak slowly here. Coffee and words, both taste better that way." It was such a small, ordinary moment, yet it felt magical. For months, I had listened to fast podcasts, watched movies with impossible accents, and repeated phrases that never stuck. But this was real communication. Simple, warm, human. He asked where I was from, what I was studying, and why I came to Denmark. I answered in broken sentences, and he didn't interrupt once. When I paused to find the right words, he waited. When I mispronounced something, he smiled, not to correct me but to encourage me. That patience was something no app, no teacher, no YouTube video had ever given me. It made me want to speak. I realized, understanding doesn't require speed, it requires presence. Before leaving, he said, "Come again tomorrow. We can practice, one coffee, one new word." I nodded, speechless. That was the first time someone treated my English not as a weakness, but as a conversation worth having. As I walked out into the cold Copenhagen air, the world didn't feel so silent anymore. I could still hear his slow, clear words echoing in my head. Coffee and words both taste better that way. Maybe, just maybe, that was the lesson I've been chasing all along. Why your brain fears English conversations. Here's the thing they never tell you about learning English. Your brain isn't afraid of words. It's afraid of embarrassment. It's not grammar that freezes your tongue. It's fear. Fear of being judged, fear of sounding stupid, fear of that awkward silence after you mispronounce something. And that fear, it's sneaky. It disguises itself as laziness or, "I'm just not good at languages." But deep down, it's your nervous system saying, "Please don't let me look like a fool again." In Denmark, I noticed how confident people sounded. Even when their English wasn't perfect. They laughed at their own mistakes. They paused mid-sentence to find the right word. And no one cared. Why? Because they grew up believing that mistakes are just part of learning, not proof of failure. Meanwhile, my brain had been trained differently. At school, every red mark, every correction, every laugh from a classmate carved a tiny scar. So when I tried to speak English in real life, My body remembered all those old errors. My heart would race, my hands would sweat, and my voice would shrink. It wasn't about English. It was about safety. Neuroscientists call it the amygdala response, the part of your brain that lights up when you sense danger. To your brain, speaking a second language in public feels like standing on stage naked. That's why you forget simple words you know. Your brain is trying to protect you by shutting down non-essential functions. The funny part? Once I understood this, everything got easier. When fear showed up, I stopped calling it failure. I started saying, "Oh, that's just my brain protecting me again." Like a nervous friend overreacting. And somehow that made me laugh instead of panic. Every time I talked to the barista, I noticed my fear shrinking. His slow pace, his calm tone, it told my brain, "You're safe here." No judgment, no rules. Just words, warmth, and maybe a little milk foam on top. The next time you freeze in a conversation, remember, your brain isn't broken, it's just scared. And the best cure for fear is kindness, not perfection. The art of listening without pressure. The next morning, I returned to the little haven. Not for caffeine, but for calm. I sat in the same corner watching people talk. This time I didn't force myself to understand every word. I just listened. And something strange happened. The more I stopped trying so hard, the more I began to understand that we're taught to chase meaning, to grab every word before it runs away. But language doesn't work like that. English isn't a math problem. It's music. You don't have to catch every note to feel the song. Once I let go of the pressure, I started hearing things I'd missed before. The rhythm, the pauses, the way people use tone to mean more than words ever could. A group of students were chatting nearby. I couldn't understand everything, but I could sense when they were joking, when they were serious, when they were teasing each other. My brain was learning patterns without panic. That's when I realized, understanding comes from immersion, not intensity. Science agrees. Linguists call it passive acquisition. Your brain picks up grammar and pronunciation subconsciously when you relax and let it. It's the same way babies learn language. No stress, no pressure. Just listening. The barista waved at me from behind the counter. "Back again," he said with that easy smile. I nodded. "Just listening today." "Good," he said. "Listening is speaking in disguise." That line stayed with me all day. Listening is speaking in disguise. Because when you truly listen, slowly, openly, you're training your mouth without even moving it. Your ears are shaping your accent, your timing, your rhythm. So that's what I did. Every day for a week, I came back, ordered the same cappuccino, and sat quietly. I didn't translate. I didn't judge. I just absorbed. And somehow my fear of English began to fade, not because I learned new words, but because I learned how to hear again. Sometimes the best way to find your voice is to stop talking for a while. Speaking slowly is not a weakness. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. The barista, whose name I'd learned was Emil, invited me to join a small English conversation group that met in the cafe every Thursday morning. My first reaction? Panic. My second? Curiosity. That I showed up early, pretending to read a book while secretly observing how others talked. There were 5 people, a mix of locals and foreigners, each speaking at their own speed. One woman from Italy spoke with pauses so long you could count the seconds between her words. Yet everyone waited patiently, nodding, smiling, listening. No one rushed her. No one corrected her. When it was my turn, I hesitated. My English still slow, I said. Emil smiled. Good. Slow is clear. Clear is confident. That line hit me like sunlight through fog. All my life I'd believed fast meant fluent. But in that little circle I saw the opposite. The slower people spoke, the more everyone leaned in. When you speak slowly, you give your brain time to breathe, and your listener time to understand. It's not weakness, it's generosity. Psychologists call this cognitive pacing. When you slow your speech, your brain synchronizes thought and language more effectively. You sound calmer, smarter, more trustworthy. That's why great communicators, from teachers to TED speakers, rarely rushed at us, so I began to speak like that. Slowly, deliberately. I stopped apologizing for my pauses. I started treating them like part of my rhythm. And something amazing happened. People actually started listening. Not just to my English, but to me. One morning, after sharing a small story about my hometown, Emil said, "See? You sound natural now." I laughed. But I spoke so slowly. He shrugged. That's what makes it beautiful. You sound human. That sentence stayed with me. Because learning a language isn't about sounding perfect, it's about sounding alive. From that day on, I stopped chasing speed. I started chasing connection. And the more slowly I spoke, the more fluent I became, not just in English but in confidence. Sometimes slowing down isn't falling behind. It's finally catching up with yourself. A cup of coffee, a new beginning. Each morning after that, the cafe became my quiet classroom. I'd order my cappuccino, find my spot by the window, and begin a small ritual. Listening, reading, and speaking out loud softly to myself. It wasn't study, it was presence. Every sip of coffee marked another step toward calm confidence. Emil started giving me tiny challenges. One day he said, "Ask the person next to you what book they're reading." Another time, "Order in English but add one new phrase." They were small tasks, but each one pushed me just enough. And when I completed them, he'd smile and say, "See? English lives in moments, not in rules." That idea changed everything. I stopped seeing English as a subject to learn and started seeing it as a world to live in. Every street sign, every bus announcement, every stranger's smile became part of my vocabulary. Some mornings other customers joined in. We'd exchange short stories about where we came from, what winter felt like back home, how we missed the sun. The cafe was like a patchwork of accents. Danish, Spanish, Thai, Polish, Vietnamese, all stitched together by a common rhythm of simple, honest English. There was laughter, mistakes, and a lot of hand gestures. But it didn't matter. Because in that space, no one was trying to be perfect. We were just trying to be understood. And that made all the difference. Psychologists say routine builds resilience. I think that's true. That daily habit, one cup of coffee, one small conversation, rewired my brain. It told me, you can do this. You belong here. Months passed, and without noticing, I had become the one welcoming new learners. Sometimes I'd sit with someone trembling like I once did, and I'd say, "It's okay. Speak slowly. We've got time." And every time I said that, I realized I wasn't just helping them find their voice. I was finding mine again, too. Finding myself again. One spring morning, I sat at my usual table in the little haven. sunlight spilling across the wooden floor. Emil waved from behind the counter and I smiled, not nervously this time but naturally. The girl who once hid behind her coffee cup now greeted strangers, laughed at her own mistakes, and told stories in English without fear. As I looked around, I realized something profound. I had come to Denmark searching for language, but what I really found was myself. English had stopped being a mountain to climb. It had become a bridge, one that connected me not only to others but to my own courage. When I first arrived, I thought fluency meant speaking fast, using fancy words, sounding like a native. But now I knew the truth. Real fluency is freedom. The freedom to express, to connect, to be human even imperfectly. The freedom to sit in silence and know that you belong, even if your grammar doesn't. Learning English had healed something deeper than vocabulary. It had softened my fear. It had taught me that confidence isn't about knowing every word. It's about knowing you'll find the right ones when you need them. That morning, as I took my first sip of cappuccino, I remembered the cold day. I almost gave up and smiled. If only that version of me could see this one now. The one who listens before she speaks. The one who speaks slowly but with heart. The one who finally feels enough. Sometimes healing doesn't happen in big moments. It starts quietly, in a small cafe with a warm cup of coffee, a kind voice, and the courage to begin again. So if you're struggling with your English, or with anything at all, remember this: you don't have to be perfect to make progress. You just have to show up, one morning, one word, one cup at a time. That's how I found myself again.